Canada has long been seen as the polite, well-behaved British colony, especially when compared to its rebellious southern neighbor. While the United States broke away in revolution, the northern British territories remained loyal, wanting nothing to do with that independence movement. But surprisingly to many, Canada's, like several other parts of the British Empire, had its own armed rebellion. At the time, Canada as we know it didn't yet exist. Instead, it was a patchwork of British colonies. The two most significant were Upper Canada, with Toronto as its capital, and to its north, Lower Canada, centered around Montreal, home to a largely French-speaking population. Throughout the early 1800s, citizens of both Upper and Lower Canada had been calling for widespread reforms. But in case you're wondering, no, those calls weren't answered. That's largely because both colonies were ruled by small, anti-democratic oligarchies. In Lower Canada, the ruling elite was called the Chateau clique, composed mostly of Englishmen who wanted the local French speakers to assimilate into English culture, which unsurprisingly didn't make them very popular in Upper Canada. Power lay with the Family Compact, another closed-off group resistant to democratic change. Naturally, these power structures faced opposition. In Upper Canada, the main critic was William Lyon Mackenzie, who led the reform movement, and in Lower Canada, it was Louis-Joseph Papineau, head of a group known as the Patriotes. In 1832, following the killing of some protesters in Montreal by Crown troops, Papineau drafted a list of demands and sent it to the British government, hoping to force reforms. But both British authorities and Lower Canadian leaders refused, insisting everything was just fine. Over the next 5 years, tensions continued to rise, and the stalemate persisted. By November 1837, things had taken a radical turn. The government of Lower Canada tried to arrest Papineau, who fled south to the United States. His supporters, meanwhile, began to violently resist government crackdowns. The rebellion escalated quickly, and before long, it had become an all-out revolt against British rule, inspired by their neighbors to the north. Rebels in Upper Canada launched their own uprising. Mackenzie and his followers took advantage of the fact that local troops had been deployed elsewhere and began their revolt. They initially made progress, but the problem was simple. They weren't professional soldiers. That didn't stop Mackenzie from proclaiming the Republic of Canada, which, as you might guess, didn't last long. Local militias crushed the movement. You might think that marked the end of Canada's rebellion story, but it didn't. The uprisings had captured attention south of the border. Many Americans sympathized with the Canadian cause. Some even organized groups to assist Mackenzie and hoping to help create a Canadian republic. Among these groups were the Hunter Brothers, a band of American volunteers who crossed into Canada and launched an invasion. Their actions soon led to clashes with British troops, and when American citizens were killed, tensions escalated sharply. Armed U.S. citizens attacking Canada naturally alarmed both London and Washington. Neither government wanted war, so an agreement was reached to stop further American incursions. Meanwhile, the rebellion in Lower Canada was thoroughly crushed by the end of 1838, so what came next for Canada, the rebels, and the British Empire? Determined to avoid another uprising, Britain appointed Lord Durham to investigate and offer recommendations. The first and at the time, the only suggestion to be implemented was the unification of the two Canadas into a single entity. As for the rebellion's leaders, they remained in exile across the U.S. border, but eventually they were pardoned and allowed to return, and that, in effect, brought Canada's revolution to an end. While it didn't result in an independent Canadian republic, the rebellion did help bring about the conditions that would later shape Canada's identity and existence. Thanks for watching this episode. A special shout-out goes to my amazing Patreon supporters, whose names you can see here on screen. Extra thanks to James Bissonette, David, Archaeologist, Party Boy Co., Danny Maloney, Colin Castleman, Rob Waterhouse, Aaron the White, Michael Reynolds, H-Way, An Emperor, Chris Wicker, Gustav Swan, Gareth Turner, Spinning 3 Plates, David, Silverman, Winston Cowood, Maggie Paxkowski, Christian Check, Anthony Beckett, Robert Wetzel, Sky Chapel, and Ike.